Hey guys, how's it going? In this one, we are checking out the P-43A-1, otherwise known as the Baby Thunderbolt. That's what I'm going to call it. Although it is technically not a P-47, it carries a lot of characteristics, and I've got some interesting stuff for you about it. So if we hop into the X-ray here, uh, the max power, and this is just in game. I don't know. It was probably close to it in real life. In game, the max power is 1,040 horsepower, and the power with WEP, which is also water injection, I believe. I'll double check the water injection bit, but um, in a match, I see on average 1,200 horsepower, and that is pretty well all across the board. No matter what altitude you're at, you're going to be making 1,200 horsepower with your weapon engaged, which is pretty nice. But let's uh, let's hop over to some gameplay, and I'll tell you guys a little bit more about this thing. So I was not able to confirm the about the water injection. I'm just going to go ahead and assume that it has it since most American planes do. But uh, obviously we're flying the variant in the Chinese tech tree, which is a Lend-Lease version. And you know, the P-43 is a very interesting plane. Like that clip right there where you guys saw the underbelly of the plane, that was the turbo supercharger that was integrated into the belly of it. So at that point, well, according to the Wikipedia article, it was the because that's what I read. Although it was interesting, and I'd recommend you guys read it just to, why not? It's good to read things. Um, I think it was a General Electric B2 or G2 turbo supercharger, and it's the same one that was used on the B-17, which is pretty interesting. But, in War Thunder, it really is like flying a baby Thunderbolt, especially the Razorback, like the P-47D-22RE or the D-23RA in the Chinese tech tree. It's very similar to that, except for the fact that it does lock up the controls more around 650. Well, okay, it's probably closer to like 620 to 650 kilometers an hour. It'll start to lock those controls up pretty bad. So this clip that you guys are watching was a decent example of that. I had a little bit of an oh crap moment, but I mean, it's usually not too hard to pull it out. And with the P-47, for example, in that plane, the faster that you go, the harder that it turns, and that's just the nature of the aircraft itself. And the P-40, yeah, I'm mixing up my numbers here. The P-43 is not really lacking in maneuverability, being smaller than the P-47, and it did in fact come before the P-47. So this plane was in operation around 1940. For my history guys out there that like to know all that stuff, operated around 1940, and it was used a lot for reconnaissance. But what we have in War Thunder is a variant with 450 cals. Two of them are mounted in the nose and two in the wings. And you only have 800 rounds of ammunition, which isn't. It could be worse. You could be a French aircraft with only a single Hispano that has 60 rounds of ammunition, but you just have to be a little bit more sparing with it. And in these first few clips, I'm using ground target belts, but the last two I did switch to universal. I think that the universal belts have a shell or two less of armor piercing. It's something like that. But I ended up using universal in the end, and that's what I've really been sticking to with most of my 50 cal planes. And yes, I did die in that last clip. If you guys were wondering, I think it was to a P-36 or something like that. Now, you really do want to fly this like a P-47 in the sense that, you know, like I said in the intro, you have that 1200 horsepower all the way up to 7,000 meters, which most planes don't. And that's one of the largest benefits of this turbo supercharger itself, is that it's going to be able to compress that extremely thin air and get a more efficient air to fuel ratio. But this is a great clip showing just the overall maneuverability of the plane. You're not really going to stay behind most Japanese planes, but I mean, you shouldn't really expect to. Going up against P-40s and things like that, I think it's just a better flying plane. And it's very interesting, to say the least. I mean, you know, it's just kind of strange to look at size-wise. But overall, it's not too bad. Especially when you consider the fact that you're sitting at 2.7, so most of the aircraft you're going to go up against aren't really that fast. The most concerning planes, I would say, are the MiG-3s, just because they have a pretty decent top speed, and they get an air spawn, which you don't. But you don't compress as much as they do as soon as they do. Like, the MiG-3 is around 500 kilometers an hour that it'll start to compress, and like I said before, it's like 620 to 650 before you really notice it on this thing. But, you know, overall, it's kind of one of those aircraft that, you know, I feel like you don't see it very much. And you're... Okay, it's the new kitten. You're probably going to see it even less because now it's foldered, which is a good thing. It's extremely cheap to research and fly it. But what that kind of means is being hidden in the folder with the P-40 in the Chinese tech tree. Players are going to have to specifically search it out and fly it, which is kind of a bummer because I think that this plane outshines the P-40 in almost every way, especially the low altitude variant in the Chinese tech tree. I mean, I don't really think it's very fair to compare the two of them just because of the P-43's high altitude performance, and that's really going to give you an edge over most opponents. Now, climbing wasn't really too much of an issue. I was seeing anywhere from like 17 to 21, depending on how steep I was climbing, and, you know, that's a variable number. It's kind of hard to calculate a single number with climb rate because you have speed, altitude, and all that. But overall, it's not too bad. And always, as always, above 3,000 meters, you are going to be at an advantage most of the time. And I would say above 4,500 to 5,000 meters, you're really going to be doing a lot better at altitude than most of the planes in the match, unless you're going up against another P-43, or for some reason you got into a crazy up tier and you're going up against P-47s. Now you are going to see 50. It's 11 o'clock right now. But you are going to see P-51Cs with it, and that's not really that much of an issue, just because the P-51C takes a lot more skill to fly than the P-43, I think. And most of the players that are flying the Mustang, the earlier variants of it, just aren't going to have enough experience to really do much in a fight. They might get a couple shots off on you, but it's not going to be the end of the world if they get on your 6. Speaking of just getting in one shot, you don't have self-sealing fuel tanks, which is one of the reasons that it was phased out so fast in real life. And in War Thunder, that kind of sucks, but if you're not getting hit, it doesn't really matter. So that's just something to keep in mind. Something that I have been doing is, if I do happen to catch a bullet and I do have a fire coming out of my wing, I'll throttle back to 0%. You could probably turn off your engine, but that might be a little bit extreme for the situation. I'm going to have to do some more testing on the 0% throttle, but my thought process behind it is the engine is, getting less fuel pumped to it and whatnot. I don't know. That's just my my thought process coming from like working on cars and stuff. But yeah, the P-43 is a very interesting aircraft, and I think I'm the first one to make a video about it in a few years now. So it was actually a request. So thank you, MZIH. I always appreciate it, guys. But we're going to wrap the video up right there. So as always, thanks for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.